across the vast, endless plains of Central Asia. There lies a land where the earth meets the sky, where icy winds carve destinies, and silence whispers the forgotten stories of empires. Once this land gave birth to a storm so powerful it reshaped the fate of the world. It began with a man abandoned, betrayed, hunted, yet destined to become the greatest conqueror history has ever known. His name was Temujin. The world would remember him as Genghis Khan. From the remote valleys of Mongolia, he united warring tribes into an unstoppable force. The Mongols rode with fire and thunder, their horses carrying them farther and faster than any army before them. Their banners darkened the skies from the Pacific to the gates of Europe. Cities fell, empires shattered. And yet, from this chaos, a new world was born. Trade flourished, cultures intertwined, and the Silk Road became the beating heart of a connected planet. But every empire rises, and every empire falls. Today, Mongolia stands silent, its winds still carrying echoes of the hooves that once thundered across. Half the earth, behind its rugged mountains and endless deserts, lie untold secrets. And the memory of a people who dared to conquer the impossible. This is the story of the Mongol Empire, a story of blood and vision, of betrayal and brotherhood, of power that transcended borders and time itself. Join us as we journey into the heart of history, where myths were forged in steel and fire, where the fate of nations was decided by the whisper of an arrow, and where one man's dream became the empire that changed the world forever. History before the storm. The eternal steppe. Long before the Mongol Empire carved its name into the chronicles of time, the Mongolian steppe was a world unto itself, a boundless ocean of grass and wind. Here, survival was not a choice. It was a relentless struggle. For thousands of years, nomadic tribes roamed this land, following the rhythm of the seasons, guided only by the stars above and the whisper of the earth beneath their feet. Life on the steppe was harsh and unforgiving. Winters plunged the land into a frozen wilderness where temperatures dropped to extremes, and blizzards swallowed entire horizons. Summers burned just as fiercely, turning grasslands into dry, endless expanses. In this land, only the strong endured, and strength was measured not by wealth or possessions, but by skill, cunning, and the loyalty of one's kin. Horses were everything. The Mongols did not just ride them. They lived through them. A child learned to ride before they could walk. Tribes hunted together, fought together, and migrated with their herds across hundreds of miles. Carrying their homes, the round felt-covered yurts, known as gairs, on the backs of oxen and camels. Yet, beneath this seemingly simple existence lay an ancient cycle of conflict. Resources were scarce, and rival clans fought bitterly for grazing lands, water, and survival itself. There were no borders, no cities, no kings, only chieftains, warriors, and blood feuds passed down from generation to generation. From these endless plains and ceaseless struggles, storm was gathering, a storm that would one day swallow empires and redraw the map of the known world, the fractured tribes. The Mongolian plateau before the 12th century was a land of constant division. Dozens of tribes, the Taishad, Merkits, Tatars, Karaites, and Naimans, battled endlessly for dominance. Alliances were fragile, broken as quickly as they were formed. Betrayal was as common as loyalty, and the smallest insult could ignite a war that lasted generations. Among these tribes, survival demanded an iron will. To secure power, a leader had to inspire both fear and respect. Raids on rival herds were commonplace, and battles were fought not for gold or glory, but for food, shelter, and survival. In this brutal arena, the seeds of greatness were sown. For it was here, amid endless bloodshed, that a boy named Temujin was born in Yi-Luar. Near the Anan River, Temujin's early life was marked by tragedy and hardship. His father, a tribal chief, was poisoned by enemies when Temujin was just 9 years old. Stripped of their status, his family was abandoned by their clan and left to fend for themselves in the harsh wilderness. Temujin, his mother, and his siblings survived by scavenging roots, hunting small animals, and enduring hunger that could drive lesser souls to despair. Yet, even as a child, Temujin possessed an unyielding spirit, a refusal to bow to fate. In this crucible of betrayal, hardship, and endless struggle, the boy who would become Genghis Khan began forging the steel of his destiny. Temujin's rise. Temujin's path to power was anything but straight. Kidnapped by the Taishad, enslaved and humiliated, he endured trials that would have broken most men. But each setback only hardened his resolve. By his teenage years, Temujin had begun forging alliances, not through brute force, but through loyalty and merit. He understood something few leaders of the steppe grasped. Unity was strength. Temujin sought out the Kirait Khan, Togrul, a powerful tribal leader, and secured his support. He rebuilt his father's followers, one family at a time, winning their loyalty not by birthright, but by generosity and vision. Unlike other tribal chiefs, he rewarded warriors based on merit, not lineage. To Temujin, courage mattered more than noble blood, and loyalty meant more than ancient feuds. This revolutionary approach began to draw warriors from rival tribes to his banner. Slowly, Temujin gathered strength, leading small raids, seizing herds, and expanding his influence. But power on the steppe came with enemies, and Temujin's rise would soon bring him into direct conflict with the Merkits, the Tatars, and the Naimans tribes that had long dominated the Mongolian plateau. The first sparks of the storm were beginning to burn. Blood and brotherhood. Temujin's genius lay not just in strategy, but in understanding people. He forged bonds of blood brotherhood that transcended tribe and kinship. His closest ally was Jamuka, a childhood friend who would later become his greatest rival. Together, they built an army of thousands and swore to carve their destiny from the chaos of the steppe. Yet, ambition is a double-edged sword. As Temujin's influence grew, Jamuka saw his friend's reforms as a threat to the old tribal order. When Temujin promoted warriors of low birth into positions of power, Jamuka turned against him. What followed was the Battle of Dalan Baltsat, a brutal clash in which Temujin's smaller, disciplined force was crushed by Jamuka's 30,000 warriors. Defeated but unbroken, Temujin retreated, rebuilt, and learned. He abandoned outdated traditions and refined his military strategies, emphasizing speed, discipline, and psychological warfare. He adopted a decimal system, organizing his warriors into units of tens, hundreds, and thousands, creating a fighting force that could move as one. Through hardship and betrayal, Temujin was reshaping the Mongol tribes into something the world had never seen before, a war machine powered by loyalty, merit, and relentless ambition. The birth of a Khan. In 1206, after decades of war, shifting alliances, and relentless struggle, Temujin achieved what no leader before him had ever done. He united the Mongolian tribes under a single banner. On the banks of the Anon River, a grand assembly known as the Kurultai was held, surrounded by chieftains who had once been bitter enemies. Temujin was proclaimed Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. The unification of the Mongol tribes was more than a political triumph. It was the birth of an idea. Genghis Khan envisioned a world where loyalty to him and the empire transcended bloodlines, clans, and ancient rivalries. He gave his people a purpose greater than survival, conquest, but for the kingdoms and empires beyond the Mongolian steppe. This was the calm before the storm. No one, not the mighty Jin dynasty in China, nor the Khwarezmian Empire in Persia, nor the kings of Europe could imagine the force that was about to descend upon them. The world was on the brink of transformation. The horsemen of the steppe were ready. The empire had been born, and history would never be the same. The storm unleashed the first campaigns in the years following his proclamation as Genghis Khan in 1206. The world began to tremble. No longer bound by tribal feuds, the Mongols were now a single, unified force under one vision: conquest. The first target lay to the east, the Jin dynasty of northern China, a vast empire of wealth, cities, and armies far larger than anything the Mongols had ever faced. The Jin believed their walls would protect them, but Genghis Khan knew better. He understood the steppe, the patience of its hunters, the swiftness of its riders, and the terror of its storms. The Mongols struck with unmatched speed, bypassing fortifications, cutting supply lines, and using psychological warfare to shatter their enemies before the first arrow was even loosed. Captured villages were spared if they surrendered, but annihilated if they resisted, a brutal message that traveled faster than any scout. By 1211, the Mongols had smashed the Jin armies in open battle. Cities fell like dominoes, and fear became their deadliest weapon. Genghis Khan's tactics were revolutionary. He combined mobility, intelligence networks, and discipline to create an army that could vanish like smoke and strike like lightning. He turned the horse into an extension of the warrior, capable of covering 100 miles in a single day. Against this living storm, the Jin crumbled, their once mighty empire retreating south in desperation. The Mongols had tasted victory, and they hungered for more. The wrath of the Khan. Victory over the Jin emboldened Genghis Khan, but it also brought new enemies. In 1215, he captured Zhengdu, modern-day Beijing, burning parts of the city and forcing the Jin court to abandon its northern capital. Yet, even as he secured China's riches, his gaze turned westward. Beyond the Gobi Desert lay the Khwarezmian Empire, stretching from Persia to Central Asia, ruled by Shah Ala ad-Din Muhammad II. At first, Genghis sought peace. He sent envoys offering trade, promising wealth through cooperation rather than war. But the Shah, blinded by arrogance, executed Genghis Khan's ambassadors, a mistake that would plunge his empire into fire and blood. In 1219, the Mongol storm descended upon Khwarezm. It was not a war, it was annihilation. Again, Genghis Khan unleashed his full fury, commanding an army of more than 200,000 riders. Cities that resisted were wiped from existence. Populations were slaughtered, rivers ran red, and the names of once great metropolises were erased from memory. Samarkand, Bukhara, Urgench, jewels of the Islamic world, fell one by one. Chroniclers describe walls collapsing under relentless siege engines, flames devouring entire quarters, and terrified civilians fleeing into deserts only to perish beneath Mongol arrows. To those who submitted, Genghis showed mercy. To those who defied him, he left nothing but ashes. The fall of Khwarezm sent shockwaves across the known world. Kings, caliphs, and emperors began whispering a single name with fear and awe: Genghis Khan, masters of the Silk Road. With Khwarezm shattered, the Mongols controlled the heart of Central Asia, the beating artery of the Silk Road, for centuries. Merchants, pilgrims, and envoys had traveled this vast network of trade routes, connecting China to the Middle East and Europe. Now, it lay under the iron grip of the Khan. But unlike many conquerors, Genghis Khan understood the value of commerce. He protected merchants, eliminated banditry, and created a system of yam stations, relay posts, where riders could deliver messages across thousands of miles in mere days. The Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace, began to emerge. Under Mongol rule, the Silk Road became safer than ever before. Goods flowed freely: silk and porcelain from China, spices from India, glassware from Persia, and silver from Europe. Ideas traveled to technologies, philosophies, and even plagues. Yet, beneath this growing prosperity, the Mongols were still at war. Genghis Khan's sons and generals pushed westward, defeating the Tangots of Western Xia and crushing the remnants of Jin resistance. Meanwhile, to the northwest, Mongol scouts clashed with Kievan Rus and European knights. Testing their strength against foreign foes, the empire was no longer just expanding. It was evolving into something far greater. A network of conquest and trade, bound together by loyalty, speed, and fear. The battle at the edge of Europe. In 1223, the Mongols encountered the combined forces of the Kievan Rus and their allies on the banks of the Kalka River. The Europeans believed the Mongols to be a minor eastern threat, little more than barbaric horsemen. They were wrong. Employing more deceptive retreats and ambushes, the Mongols lured the Rus armies into open terrain, their preferred battlefield. There, the steppe warriors unleashed a storm of arrows, encircled their foes, and executed a slaughter so complete that few survived to tell the tale. It was Europe's first true encounter with the Mongols, and a grim warning of what was to come. But Genghis Khan was not yet ready to push deep into Europe. His empire was vast, stretching from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea. And maintaining control required discipline, order, and reform. He returned east, leaving his generals to secure the empire's borders and administer its wealth. By the early 1220s, Genghis Khan had forged the largest contiguous empire in human history. Yet, in his mind, the work was unfinished. He dreamed of conquering the entire known world, of uniting humanity under his banner. The Mongol war machine, however, was about to face its greatest test: the death of the great Khan. In 1227, during a campaign against the Western Xia dynasty, Genghis Khan fell ill, or, as some sources claim, was injured in battle. The details remain shrouded in mystery, but his death marked the end of an era. His burial site remains unknown. To this day, hidden somewhere in the vast Mongolian wilderness, yet death could not silence his legacy. Before passing, Genghis divided his empire among his sons, creating 4 great khanates that would carry his vision forward: the Yuan dynasty in China, the Ilkhanate in Persia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, and the Golden Horde in Russia. The storm he unleashed did not end with his death. Under his successors, most notably his grandson Kublai Khan, the Mongols would conquer all of China, challenge Japan, devastate the Middle East, and stand at the very gates of Europe. Genghis Khan had risen from nothing, an outcast, hunted and betrayed to build the largest empire the world had ever seen. His name became legend, his deeds immortal, his vision eternal. But with great power comes great fragility. The Mongol Empire was vast, but beneath its glory, cracks were beginning to form, and the world would soon feel their tremors. Empire at its zenith, and the seeds of decline: the rise of Kublai Khan. After Genghis Khan's death in 1227, his descendants inherited not only the largest land empire in history, but also his relentless vision of expansion. Among them, one man would rise above the rest, a grandson born to command the world. His name was Kublai Khan, intelligent, ambitious, and deeply strategic. Kublai understood that the Mongol future lay not just in conquest, but in governance. Unlike many of his relatives who remained fiercely tied to nomadic traditions, Kublai embraced the wealth, sophistication, and administrative systems of China. He surrounded himself with scholars, engineers, and advisors from across Asia and the Middle East, blending Mongol martial strength with Chinese statecraft. In 1260, Kublai was proclaimed Great Khan after a bitter succession struggle. But his authority was immediately challenged by his brother Arik Bey, plunging the empire into civil war. Kublai's victory came at a cost, though he claimed the title of universal ruler. The empire was already showing signs of fragmentation. Despite this, Kublai's ambitions burned brighter than ever. His eyes were fixed on Song dynasty China, the last great bastion of resistance. The stage was set for a conquest that would redefine Asia, the Yuan dynasty. By 1271, Kublai Khan had declared himself Emperor of China and established the Yuan dynasty, a monumental shift in Mongol history. For the first time, the horsemen of the steppe transformed into rulers of the world's most advanced civilization, the conquest of the Southern Song. Dynasty was brutal and unrelenting. After years of siege warfare, naval battles, and relentless pressure, the Song capital of Hangzhou surrendered in 1276. By 1279, the last remnants of resistance were crushed at the Battle of Yamen, where the Song fleet was destroyed and thousands drowned at sea. With this victory, China, one of the richest and most populous regions on Earth, fell entirely under Mongol control. Kublai Khan's court at Khanbalik, modern-day Beijing, became a cosmopolitan hub where Persian astronomers, Venetian merchants, Arab mathematicians, and Chinese engineers mingled. It was during this era that Marco Polo arrived, carrying stories of Mongol grandeur back to Europe, igniting imaginations across the continent. But beneath the glittering wealth of the Yuan dynasty lay growing unrest. Heavy taxes, natural disasters, and resentment among the Han Chinese population brewed tension that would one day erupt into rebellion. For now, however, the empire basked in the height of its power, stretching from Korea to Persia, from Siberia to the South China Sea. Ambitions beyond China. Kublai Khan's vision extended far beyond China's borders. His fleets sailed eastward, seeking to conquer the islands of Japan. In 1274, the Mongols launched their first invasion, sending a massive armada across the stormy seas. Armed with superior weapons and ferocious warriors, they seemed unstoppable until nature itself intervened, as the Mongol fleet approached the shores of Kyushu. A powerful typhoon struck, wrecking hundreds of ships and drowning tens of thousands of soldiers. The Japanese called it the kamikaze, the divine wind, believing their gods had saved them. Undeterred, Kublai launched a second invasion in 1281, this time with an even larger fleet, perhaps the largest ever assembled in history. Yet once again, another devastating typhoon obliterated his armada. These failures marked a turning point. The Mongols, who had conquered empires with unmatched speed, had been humbled by the forces of nature. Nevertheless, Kublai's armies continued. Campaigns in Vietnam, Burma, and Java, achieving mixed results. The steppe warriors excelled on land, but the unfamiliar jungles, heat, and disease drained their strength. Despite these setbacks, the Mongol Empire under Kublai remained the dominant power of the 13th century. Its influence reached every corner of Eurasia, shaping economies, cultures, and trade in ways the world had never seen before. The Golden Horde and the West. While Kublai ruled in China, his cousins to the west forged their own legacy through the Golden Horde, established by Batu Khan, a grandson of Genghis. The Golden Horde swept across the steppes of Eastern Europe, subjugating the Kievan Rus and establishing Mongol dominance over Russia for more than 2 centuries. In 1241, Mongol forces invaded Poland and Hungary, defeating European knights with terrifying ease. At the Battle of Mohi, the Hungarian army was annihilated, and panic spread across the continent. Chroniclers describe the Mongols as demons from the east, unstoppable and merciless. Yet just as Europe seemed poised for conquest, a twist of fate saved it. News of the great Khan Gadai's death forced the Mongol armies to retreat, sparing Western Europe from devastation, at least for the moment. Even so, Mongol influence reached deep into Europe. Trade routes flourished, ideas crossed borders, and a new era of connectivity began. The Mongols had reshaped the political landscape, forcing kingdoms to adapt, unite, and innovate in response to this unprecedented Eastern threat. The cracks begin to show. Despite its vast power, the Mongol Empire was beginning to fracture. Its size, stretching across thousands of miles, made unity nearly impossible. The four great khanates, once bound by loyalty to the Great Khan, began drifting apart, each pursuing its own ambitions. Kublai Khan's Yuan dynasty faced growing resistance from within China, while the Ilkhanate in Persia clashed with the Golden Horde over territory and trade. Rivalries turned into open conflict, and the once united Mongol war machine began to splinter. After Kublai's death in 1294, instability deepened. Corruption spread, rebellions erupted, and natural disasters further weakened the empire's grip. In China, resentment against Mongol rule intensified, setting the stage for the eventual rise of the Ming dynasty in 1368. The Mongols had reached the zenith of their power, but the forces of decline were already in motion. What had once been a storm that reshaped the world was slowly dispersing into scattered winds. Yet, even as the empire fractured, its legacy endured, in culture, and in the echoes of hoofbeats that once thundered across half the earth. Culture, the spirit of the steppe, language of the eternal sky. To understand the Mongols, one must first understand the language of the steppe, the words shaped by wind, silence, and survival. The Mongolic languages, including classical Mongolian, were more than tools of communication. They were vessels of memory, poetry, and identity. Every sound carried the rhythm of galloping hooves, the howl of winter winds, and the whisper of ancient legends passed from one generation to the next. In the 13th century, as the empire expanded, Genghis Khan introduced the Uyghur script, a vertical writing system adapted from the Uyghur Turks. For the first time, the Mongols' oral Kuga. The Mongols' oral traditions were recorded, and their edicts traveled across the empire on parchment and silk. Through this script, decrees reached from the Great Wall of China to the plains of Hungary, binding diverse peoples under a single imperial vision. Yet the Mongols were polyglots by necessity. Their empire encompassed Persians, Chinese, Arabs, Russians, and countless others, creating a mosaic of tongues and cultures. Interpreters were as vital as warriors, and diplomacy often began not with steel, but with words. The Mongols' language was born of the land, sparse, direct, and poetic. A single phrase could describe the endless horizon, the taste of rain on dry grass, or the loyalty of a warrior. Beneath their reputation as conquerors lay a people deeply connected to their home, their ancestors, and the eternal blue sky they called Tengir. Faith under the eternal blue sky. At the heart of Mongol spirituality was Tengrism, an ancient belief system rooted in the worship of the eternal blue sky. To the Mongols, the sky, vast, infinite, and unchanging, was divine. It watched over warriors in battle, guided nomads across the steppe, and decided the fate of empires. Genghis Khan himself claimed his authority came from Tengri, the supreme sky god, believing his conquests were part of a divine mandate. Alongside Tengri stood Edagun Ik, the Mother Earth, symbolizing the balance between the heavens and the land. Rituals were held before great campaigns, where shamans offered sacrifices of milk, meat, and white horses to seek blessings. Yet the Mongol Empire was remarkable for its religious tolerance. From the Islamic scholars of Persia to the Buddhist monks of Tibet, from Russian Orthodox priests to Taoist sages, the empire welcomed diverse beliefs. Genghis Khan understood that unity required respecting the gods of others. Instead of imposing a single faith, he allowed conquered peoples to worship freely, often inviting leaders of different religions too. His court to debate philosophy and theology. This openness transformed the Mongol Empire into a crossroads of spirituality, where ideas flowed as freely as trade along the Silk Road. It was a vast realm where shamans, imams, monks, and priests coexisted under the same eternal sky. Nomadic life and traditions. To be Mongol was to be nomadic. The Mongols were children of the wind, living in harmony with the rhythms of the seasons. Their homes, the iconic gairs, round, portable tents made of felt and wood, symbolized both resilience and adaptability. Built to withstand freezing winters and scorching summers, a gair could be dismantled in hours, carried across vast distances, and rebuilt wherever grass and water called life on the steppe was communal. Families traveled in a bu, extended clans that shared resources and responsibilities. Herding livestock was the heart of existence. Horses, sheep, goats, yaks, and camels provided food, clothing, shelter, and transportation. A person's wealth was measured not in gold, but in the size and health of their herds. Daily routines were simple yet demanding. At dawn, riders set out to graze animals. Women prepared dairy products like arag, fermented mares, milk, and evenings were spent around the fire, sharing songs and stories passed down through generations. Hospitality was sacred. A traveler, no matter how distant or foreign, could expect food, warmth, and safety in any Mongol camp. To refuse hospitality was unthinkable. Survival depended on trust between strangers in this harsh land. In every gesture, from the sharing of milk tea to the exchange of tales beneath starlit skies, lay an unspoken bond between people and steppe. Life and horizon, music, songs, and the voice of the land. Mongol music is the heartbeat of the steppe. Rooted in nature and spirituality, it reflects the eternal relationship between humans, animals, and the land. The marin kor, a two-stringed instrument carved with the head of a horse, is more than just a musical tool. It is a symbol of Mongol identity. Legends say its sound was born from the spirit of a warrior's beloved horse, carrying its memory through every note. Equally mesmerizing is kumi, or throat singing, a unique vocal technique where singers produce multiple tones simultaneously. Listening to kumi is like hearing the wind, rivers, and mountains speak a harmony between the human voice and the world around it. These songs were performed during ceremonies, battles, and long journeys, lifting spirits and invoking ancestral blessings. Music was not entertainment. It was storytelling. Epic ballads recounted the deeds of warriors, the beauty of the land, and the mysteries of the gods. Around fires beneath star-strewn skies, elders sang tales that bound past, present, and future into a single breath. Even today, Mongolian music carries the memory of the empire, echoing across festivals and celebrations, preserving a heritage older than many nations. The code of the steppe. Beneath their fearsome reputation, the Mongols followed a strict moral and legal framework known as the yasa, a code attributed to Genghis Khan himself. Though partly shrouded in mystery, the yasa laid down rules for loyalty, justice, and order, binding warriors to a higher ideal than mere conquest. Theft, betrayal, and cowardice were punished severely, while merit, courage, and discipline were rewarded. Religious tolerance was enforced. Women were granted protections unusual for the time, and the rights of envoys and merchants were safeguarded under pain of death. This legal code transformed the Mongols from scattered tribes into a structured society where loyalty to the Khan transcended kinship and bloodlines. But beyond laws, the Mongols lived by unwritten values: honor, unity, and respect for the eternal. Land to waste resources was shameful. To dishonor one's horse was unthinkable. To break an oath was worse than death. These principles gave the empire its cohesion, turning warriors into brothers and tribes into a nation. The yasa was more than governance, it was identity. It reflected the spirit of a people who balanced freedom with duty, ferocity with faith, and ambition with survival beneath the endless blue sky. Festivals beneath the eternal sky. For the Mongols, festivals were not just celebrations, they were sacred gatherings that bound families, clans, and entire nations together. Among these, the most revered was Naadam, a festival that has survived for over 800 years and is still celebrated in Mongolia. Today, Naadam is called the Three Games of Men, showcasing the ultimate tests of strength and skill: wrestling, horse racing, and archery. But make no mistake, women and children also take part, especially in horse racing, where riders as young as 5 compete in grueling long-distance races across the open steppe. Wrestling matches are ceremonial, beginning with the eagle dance, where competitors spread their arms like soaring birds, symbolizing freedom under the eternal blue sky. Archers, dressed in vibrant traditional garments, send arrows slicing through the air with astonishing precision, while crowds erupt. In cheers beyond the contests, Naadam is about community and identity. Families reunite, songs echo across the plains, and shamans bless the games with offerings of fermented mare's milk. It is a living link to the past, a reminder of the Mongols' enduring connection to their ancestors and the land. In Genghis Khan's time, such festivals also served political purposes. They were moments where the Khan's power was displayed, alliances were forged, and unity was reaffirmed. Beneath the pageantry, Naadam was and remains the heartbeat of the Mongol spirit: clothing, craftsmanship, and symbols of power. The Mongols' clothing reflected both practicality and pride. The iconic deil, a long, belted robe, was worn by men, women, and children alike. Made of silk, cotton, or wool, depending on the season, it was designed to withstand the harsh extremes of the steppe. In winter, layers of sheepskin and fur protected against icy winds. In summer, light fabrics allowed freedom of movement, but clothing was also symbolic. Nobles and warriors adorned their deils with intricate patterns, embroidery, and vibrant colors: red for power, blue for the eternal sky, yellow for prosperity, and green for peace. High-ranking leaders wore belts and boots decorated with silver or gold, signifying their status. Craftsmanship thrived under the Mongol Empire. Blacksmiths forged lightweight yet deadly composite bows. Artisans sculpted ornaments from jade and bone. And silk weavers brought patterns from China and Persia together into stunning hybrid designs. Each object carried stories of identity and empire, blending steppe traditions with influences from across Eurasia. Even helmets and armor were not purely functional. They bore symbols of strength, loyalty, and divine protection. For the Mongols, beauty and purpose coexisted seamlessly, making every crafted object a reflection of their world: practical, spiritual, and deeply meaningful. Flavors of the steppe. The Mongols' cuisine was shaped by their nomadic lifestyle and deep reliance on livestock. Food was simple, hearty, and designed to fuel warriors and travelers for long journeys across unforgiving terrain. At its heart was dairy, milk, butter. Cream, yogurt, and cheese formed the foundation of the Mongol diet. Among the most iconic drinks was arag, fermented mare's milk, considered both a delicacy and a sacred offering during rituals. Meat was equally central, especially mutton. Goat and horse meat, often boiled or roasted. One of their most famous dishes, Bu's steamed meat dumplings, survives as a Mongolian staple to this day. For long campaigns, warriors carried dried meat called borts, which could be rehydrated into a rich broth in minutes, allowing them to eat while on the move. Despite their rugged simplicity, Mongol cuisine evolved as the empire expanded. Trade along the Silk Road introduced spices from India, rice from China, and bread from Persia, blending flavors into a unique culinary heritage. A feast in the Great Khan's court might feature Persian sweets, Chinese tea, and Central Asian lamb dishes served side by side, a true testament to the empire's diversity. But perhaps the most sacred aspect of Mongol dining was hospitality. A stranger entering a gur would always be offered tea, milk, or meat, even if supplies were scarce. In sharing food, the Mongols shared trust, a tradition that bound their vast empire together. Cities architecture, and urban life. Though famed as nomads, the Mongols were also builders. Under Genghis Khan and his successors, the empire founded new cities and transformed existing ones into hubs of trade, culture, and governance. At the heart of this transformation stood Karakorum, the capital of the Mongol Empire. Founded in 1235, unlike the felt-covered gers of the countryside, Karakorum boasted stone temples, lavish palaces, and bustling marketplaces where traders from China, Persia, India, and Europe exchanged goods and ideas. Silk and spices flowed in, while furs and horses traveled out, making it one of the most vibrant centers of the medieval world. Architecture during this period was a fusion of influences. Chinese artisans introduced pagoda-style designs, while Islamic architects brought domes, arches, and intricate tilework. Buddhist temples stood alongside mosques and Christian churches, symbolizing the empire's religious tolerance and cosmopolitan spirit. These cities were more than administrative centers, they were melting pots of humanity. Merchants, scholars, engineers, and artists converged under Mongol rule, sparking cultural exchanges that reshaped Eurasia. Where the open steppe met urban ambition, the Mongols bridged worlds in stone and silk, a culture of blending and legacy. Beneath their conquests lay a profound ability to absorb, adapt, and transform. As the Mongols expanded across Asia and Europe, they did not erase local traditions. They wove them into their own identity. In China, Mongol rulers adopted aspects of Confucian governance while preserving their nomadic customs. In Persia, they embraced Persian artistry, science, and administration, creating a rich, hybrid culture. In Russia, they influenced political systems and military strategies that shaped the region for centuries. The Mongol Empire was a living network where ideas, technologies, religions, and traditions traveled faster than ever before. Papermaking from China reached Europe, Islamic medicine reached East Asia, and foods, fabrics, and philosophies crossed boundaries once thought impassable. Today, echoes of Mongol culture remain in festivals like Nodam, in the haunting melodies of throat singing, in the felt walls of gers still dotting the steppes, and in the countless innovations they carried across continents. The Mongols were not just conquerors. They were connectors of worlds, leaving behind a legacy that reshaped civilization under the eternal blue sky. The child named Temujin. In the year 1162, under the sacred Burkhan Khaldan mountain, a boy was born to the Borjigin clan. His name was Temujin, meaning blacksmith, a name given by his father, Yasuge, after capturing a Tatar chieftain of the same name. From the moment of his birth, Temujin's life was marked by hardship and survival. He was born into a world of tribal rivalries, shifting alliances, and endless blood feuds across the Mongolian steppe. As a child, Temujin's father arranged a marriage for him with a girl named Bert, sealing an alliance with her tribe. But fate would test Temujin before he could fulfill his father's plans. When Temujin was only 9 years old, Yasuge was poisoned by enemies during a feast. His sudden death left the family vulnerable. Without a strong leader, their clan abandoned Temujin, his mother Helen, and his siblings, leaving them to survive alone in the unforgiving wilderness. Hunger became their constant companion. Temujin learned to hunt small animals, gather roots, and fish icy rivers just to keep his family alive. The steppe showed no mercy. Winters froze the weak, while rival tribes prowled like wolves. But even as a child, Temujin displayed iron, will, and unyielding resolve. He grew into a hunter, a fighter, and above all, a leader. Yet hardship struck again when he and his younger brother Bektar quarreled over food. Temujin, fearing Bektar might betray the family, made a fateful decision. He killed his own brother. This act haunted him, but it also steeled his determination to rise above chaos, unite his people, and build a future where families would never suffer abandonment again. Chains, betrayal, and the first blood. After his father's death, Temujin wandered the harsh plains with his family, surviving on scraps, hunting wild marmots, and drinking river water that bit with ice. Yet, even in these desperate days, whispers of his potential spread among the scattered Mongol tribes. They said Temujin had the iron gaze of a hawk and the heart of a wolf. But such whispers brought danger. One night, the Taishad clan, ancient rivals of his father, ambushed Temujin's camp. At just 15 years old, he was captured. The Taishad viewed him as a threat to their dominance and enslaved him, placing him in a wooden kang, a brutal collar designed to break both body and spirit. Days turned into weeks. Temujin was forced to perform hard labor, his neck raw from the weight of the kang, yet his spirit refused to bend. Every night, as the cold winds clawed at his skin, he dreamed of freedom and of uniting his people under one banner. Salvation came unexpectedly. A sympathetic Taishad guard, moved by the boy's resolve, secretly helped him escape under the cover of darkness. Temujin fled into the night, his breath ragged, his feet bloodied, but his soul burning with a newfound fire. He had tasted slavery, and he swore no Mongol would ever bow again. Free, but hunted, Temujin returned to his family and began to rebuild his strength. He gathered a small band of loyal followers, brothers, childhood friends, and those who had also suffered under tribal oppression. Among them was Jamuka, his blood brother Anda, a charismatic leader who shared Temujin's dream. Or so it seemed. Together, Temujin and Jamuka built a coalition of warriors, raiding enemy camps and forging alliances. But power is a double-edged sword, and soon ambition would tear their brotherhood apart. Jamuka, desiring dominance, betrayed Temujin, leading to the Battle of Dalan Baltsit, where 30,000 warriors clashed beneath a blood-red sky. Temujin's smaller force was defeated. Many of his followers boiled alive in a savage display of tribal vengeance. But he survived. And from this defeat, he learned a brutal truth. Loyalty must be earned, not assumed. Forging the wolf's banner. Defeated but not broken, Temujin retreated into the wilderness, carrying with him lessons carved from blood and betrayal. He understood. Now what few leaders did. A divided people cannot survive, and loyalty cannot be inherited. It must be earned. Among the scattered Mongol tribes, Temujin began crafting something radical, a new order unlike anything the steppe had ever seen. He rejected the old system of privilege based on noble birth. Instead, he promoted warriors by merit, skill, and loyalty. A shepherd who proved his courage could rise higher than a chieftain's son. This revolution won him followers from every corner of the steppe, men tired of being pawns in the endless games of tribal elites. Slowly, clan by clan, Temujin forged a brotherhood of warriors, bound not by blood, but by vision. In 1186. At the sacred river Anan, Temujin's loyal warriors gathered in a Kurultai, a great council of Mongol chiefs, beneath the fluttering banners of the Nine Yak-tails. He was proclaimed Genghis Khan, meaning universal ruler. Yet the path ahead was treacherous. The powerful Jamuka, once his blood brother, now became his greatest rival. When Temujin seized Jamuka's followers through fair distribution of war spoils, Jamuka retaliated with 30,000 men, while Genghis commanded barely 20,000. The two armies clashed at the Battle of Dalan Baltsit, where the grass turned crimson beneath a storm of arrows. Though Genghis lost that day, he did not falter. His discipline, organization, and vision continued to attract warriors from defeated tribes who admired his fairness. Over the following years, one by one, the tribes began to bend the knee. Genghis forged alliances through diplomacy, marriage, and, when necessary, overwhelming force. He built an army, not of clans, but of a nation, And as the tribes united, so too did their ambitions. No longer would they merely survive on the steppe under Genghis Khan. They would conquer the world. The world trembles. By 1206, the impossible had become reality. Temujin, now Genghis Khan, stood as the undisputed ruler of the Mongol steppe. From the frozen forests of Siberia to the rolling sands of the Gobi, every tribe had bent the knee. But for Genghis, unity was not the destination. It was only the beginning. He gazed beyond Mongolia's endless grasslands and saw a fractured world ripe for conquest. To the east lay the mighty Jin dynasty of China, a civilization rich in wealth but divided by corruption. To the west sprawled the powerful Khwarezmian Empire, its cities glittering along the Silk Road, and beyond them, Persia, Russia, India, the Middle East, and Europe itself. But to conquer the world, Genghis needed more than warriors. He needed an unstoppable engine of war. He transformed his army into a highly disciplined, organized, and efficient force unlike any the world had seen. Each unit was structured in groups of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000 men. Scouts rode ahead to gather intelligence, mapping enemy terrain and weaknesses. Communication was perfected through a network of relay riders that could carry orders across hundreds of kilometers in a single day. Above all, he embraced psychological warfare. Before a single arrow flew, Mongol spies spread rumors of invincibility, sowing fear long before battle began. Cities that resisted were crushed without mercy. Those that surrendered were spared and integrated into the empire. In 1211, Genghis Khan launched his first great campaign, the invasion of the Jin dynasty in northern China. Mongol horsemen swept across the Great Wall like a living storm, burning through enemy defenses with speed and precision. Within 3 years, the Mongols captured the strategic fortress city of Jiangdu. Today's Beijing, the world was beginning to understand a terrifying truth. The Mongols could not be stopped. Genghis Khan had transformed a scattered people into the most formidable military machine in history. And he had only just begun. Wrath of the eternal blue sky. By 1218, the Mongol Empire stretched from Manchuria to the edges of Central Asia. The next target lay along the fabled Silk Road. The Khwarezmian Empire, a thriving network of wealthy Persian cities under the rule of Shah Ala ad-Din Muhammad II. Genghis Khan approached as a friend, not a foe. He sent envoys bearing lavish gifts, proposing trade and alliance. But the Shah, blinded by arrogance, made a mistake that would doom his empire. At the city of Otrar, one of Genghis's caravans was seized, its merchants executed as spies. Furious but restrained, Genghis sent 3 ambassadors demanding justice. Instead, the Shah humiliated them, killing one and mutilating the others. That single act lit a fire beneath the Mongols. Genghis Khan swore vengeance by the eternal blue sky. In 1219, an army of 200,000 Mongol horsemen thundered westward. Like a storm rolling off the steppe, what followed was one of history's most devastating campaigns. Mongol forces surrounded and annihilated entire cities. Bukhara fell first. As Genghis rode through its grand mosque, he declared, "I am the punishment of God." Samarkand, the jewel of the Silk Road, surrendered after a siege, its defenders executed, its artisans spared and relocated. Otrar, where the insult began, was reduced to ashes, its governor executed by pouring molten silver into his ears. But it wasn't just brute force. Strategy and speed defined every victory. Genghis used feigned retreats to lure armies into ambushes, destroyed supply lines, and weaponized fear itself. Cities that resisted were annihilated. Those that surrendered were integrated, their craftsmen and scholars enriching the empire by 1221. The Khwarezmian Empire was gone, its ruler dead. and the Mongols now stood at the gates of Persia. The Silk Road, once divided among rival kingdoms, now flowed uninterrupted under Mongol control. Yet, Genghis Khan was not satisfied. His scouts had reached the Caucasus and even the edges of Europe. To him, the world was still vast, and his destiny far from complete when the world bowed. By 1223, the Mongols had shattered the Khwarezmian Empire and turned Central Asia into a vast staging ground for conquest. Genghis Khan now looked toward the West lands, filled with unfamiliar armies, rich cities, and ancient civilizations. His first strike came against the Kievan Rus, a loose federation of Slavic principalities in modern-day Russia and Ukraine. In 1223, at the Battle of the Kalka River, 20,000 Mongols faced an allied force of 80,000 Rus and Kipchak warriors. Using their trademark feigned retreat, the Mongols lured the Rus deep into the steppe before encircling and annihilating them. The defeat sent shockwaves through Eastern Europe, but this was only a reconnaissance mission. Genghis withdrew, focusing on consolidating his empire. Meanwhile, scouts mapped the distant lands of Poland, Hungary, and the Balkans. To kings and princes of Europe, the Mongols were little more than a rumor carried on the wind. They had no idea what was coming. In 1227, before Genghis Khan could lead his ultimate Western campaign, fate intervened. During a campaign against the Western Xia dynasty in northwestern China, the great conqueror fell ill and died. His final resting place remains one of history's greatest mysteries, hidden somewhere in the Mongolian wilderness, untouched to this day. But his death did not halt the Mongol storm. His empire, now the largest continuous land empire in human history, passed to his sons and grandsons. Among them, one name would soon eclipse even Genghis himself in global fame: Kublai Khan, by 1240. Under Genghis's descendants, the Mongols returned to Russia and unleashed total war. The cities of Ryazan, Vladimir, and Kiev were burned to the ground. Survivors were slaughtered, enslaved, or scattered. Europe trembled as rumors spread of horsemen from the ends of the earth, an unstoppable force that left nothing but ashes. In 1241, Mongol armies swept into Poland and Hungary, defeating combined European forces at the Battle of Legnica and the Battle of Mohi, just as the gates of Europe seemed ready to fall. A sudden twist of fate saved the West. The great Khan Gadai, Genghis's son, died in Karakorum. Mongol generals abandoned the campaign to return home for the succession. Europe had escaped, but only barely. The Mongols had proven that no kingdom, no civilization, and no empire was beyond their reach. By the mid-13th century, the Mongol Empire stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the Black Sea, controlling nearly 1/4 of the world's landmass and forever altering the course of human history. Children of the eternal blue sky. Before they became conquerors, before they carved an empire across continents, the Mongols were children of the steppe. For thousands of years, their lives were shaped by the harsh beauty of Mongolia, a land of endless horizons, bitter winters, and roaring summer winds. To survive here required unity, resilience, and adaptability. The Mongols saw themselves as people of the eternal blue sky, the divine force they called Tengri, who watched over their lives and battles. Tengrism, their ancient spiritual belief, wasn't about temples or scriptures. It was a faith rooted in nature, in the wind that carried their horses, the rivers that fed their herds, and the mountains that guarded their ancestors' spirits. Every tree, every stream, every wild animal had its own soul. To live was to be in harmony with the vast, living earth. Language bound these nomadic tribes together. The early Mongolic tongue, sharp and melodic, carried the songs of warriors and the whispers of elders. There was no written script until Genghis Khan introduced the Ugar script in the 13th century. Before that, Mongol culture was preserved through oral traditions, Epic storytelling. Legends of ancient heroes. An ancestral wisdom passed down from one generation to the next beneath starlit skies. Around the Gare, their round portable. Home life was simple, yet rich. Men hunted and herded. Women managed households and crafted clothes. And children grew up riding horses before they could even walk. Hospitality was sacred. Travelers, even strangers, were welcomed with arag, fermented mare's milk, and stories shared beside the fire at night. Under the dome of the steppe, elders told tales of wolves and warriors, sky gods and shamans. Weaving history into myth, this is where the legend of Genghis Khan was born. Not as a king, but as a boy of the grasslands, cradled by the whispers of wind and stars. Songs of the steppe, colors of the soul. For the Mongols, music was memory. It wasn't just entertainment. 'Twas the soul's language, a bridge between earth and sky. Past and present. The mooring core, carved with a horse's head, became their most iconic instrument. Its two strings could mimic the sound of a galloping horse, the whisper of wind, or the distant cry of an eagle. Through these notes, Mongols remembered their ancestors' celebrated victories and mourned the fallen. Throat singing, known as kumi, was another ancient tradition, where a single singer could produce 2 or even 3 tones at once. This hypnotic, otherworldly sound came from a deep connection with nature, imitating the flowing of rivers, the roar of storms, and the hum of the earth itself. To hear kumi beneath the endless Mongolian sky is to feel time dissolve, as though you are listening to the heartbeat of the steppe itself. Festivals reflected the Mongols' joyful resilience. The grandest of all was No Dam, celebrated for centuries and still alive today. It is the festival of the 3 manly games: wrestling, horse racing, and archery. These weren't just sports, they were living echoes of survival tests, of strength, speed, and skill that once determined life or death on the steppe. Each Nadam is a reunion of the nation's spirit, where music, dance, and storytelling merge under the open sky. Art, too, carried their soul. From intricate embroidered patterns on deal robes to symbolic carvings on saddles and weapons, Mongol craftsmanship blended practicality with beauty. Their visual language told stories of wolves, falcons, dragons, and sky gods, mythological guardians, tied to their identity. Unlike monumental architecture of settled civilizations, Mongol art was portable, designed to move as freely as its creators. Literature flowed through oral traditions. Before written Mongolian emerged, storytellers called Iligershin memorized epic tales lasting days. Among them, the most legendary is The Secret History of the Mongols, an extraordinary chronicle written after Genghis Khan's death. It paints a deeply human portrait of the conqueror, not just as a warrior, but as a father, a leader, and a man shaped by betrayal, love, and destiny. In their songs, festivals, and art, the Mongols preserved what no empire, no war, no passing century could erase: their spirit. A spirit as wild and boundless as the steppe, carried on the wind and etched into the memory of the eternal blue sky. Life beneath the eternal blue sky. To understand the Mongols, we must step into their homes, share their food, and walk their lands. The gyr, or yurt, was more than a shelter, it was the soul of nomadic life. Designed with genius simplicity, these round, portable homes could be dismantled in less than an hour, packed onto camels or carts, and rebuilt wherever the herd wandered next. Inside, the gyr was a circle of life. The central hearth symbolized the family's heart. The northern altar honored ancestors and spirits, and everything around it reflected order, balance, and harmony. Hospitality was sacred among the Mongols. In the unforgiving expanse of the steppe, survival often depended on strangers' kindness. Anyone arriving at a gyr, whether friend, wanderer, or enemy, was welcomed with warmth and respect. Guests were offered arag, fermented mares, milk, and hearty meals, often featuring budog goat or marmot, cooked from the inside with hot stones or korkog, a rich meat stew. Refusing a host's offerings was considered deeply disrespectful. To share food was to share life itself. The Mongols' clothing reflected both practicality and beauty. Their traditional robe, the deal, was designed to protect against the brutal winds and icy winters of the steppe. Woven from sheep's wool and adorned with colorful sashes, each deal carried patterns and symbols unique to families or tribes. Boots were crafted with upturned toes, not for style, but to avoid damaging the earth and disturbing spirits beneath the soil. Even in battle, their armor was lightweight and mobile, allowing warriors to ride for days without rest. Family and kinship formed the bedrock of Mongol society. Children were taught to ride horses before they could even walk, learning early the bond between human and animal. Women held remarkable influence. They managed households, handled trade, and often acted as advisors to tribal leaders. While Genghis Khan's empire was built on conquest, its roots were nurtured in family bonds, communal strength, and collective survival. Finally, there was spirituality, a silent heartbeat beneath everything. Before Buddhism arrived, Mongols practiced Tengrism, an ancient faith that saw the world as a living, breathing entity. Shamans served as guides between realms, performing rituals to honor ancestors, spirits, and the eternal blue sky. Later, with the spread of Buddhism, Mongolian spirituality transformed but never disappeared. It became a beautiful fusion of old beliefs and new wisdom, where prayer flags flutter alongside shamanic drums beneath sacred mountains. Beneath the eternal blue sky, the Mongols carved a way of life that moved with the seasons, danced with the winds, and sang with the earth. It was a culture born not from cities or palaces, but from freedom, a freedom so vast and unyielding that it still defines Mongolia today. Mongol economy. The wealth of the steppe. At first glance, the Mongol homeland seems poor and desolate, a sea of grass, windswept hills, and frozen winters. But to the Mongols, this land was wealth itself. Herds of horses, camels, sheep, and goats formed the backbone of their economy. Livestock wasn't just food, it was currency, status, and survival. A family's power was measured not in gold, but in the size of its herds. Horses, in particular, were sacred. They carried warriors into battle, pulled gears across the plains, and fed the people with milk and meat. Without the horse, there would be no Mongol Empire. When Genghis Khan rose to power, he understood something profound. The steppe alone couldn't sustain an empire. While the Mongols were unmatched in battle, their homeland lacked the luxuries and resources of settled civilizations. To secure lasting power, they needed access to trade routes, agricultural lands, and skilled artisans. And so began one of the most transformative strategies in history. The Mongols would conquer not just for territory, but for connectivity. As the empire expanded, it swallowed China, Persia, Central Asia, and Eastern Europe, and with it, the Mongols gained control over the Silk Road, the ancient artery of global trade. Under Mongol rule, the Silk Road entered its golden age. From the bustling markets of Beijing to the palaces of Baghdad, from the workshops of Samarkand to the ports of the Black Sea, merchants could now travel thousands of miles under a single banner. To protect this economic lifeline, the Mongols enforced what historians now call the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace. Caravans carrying silk, porcelain, gold, and spices moved under the protection of Mongol soldiers. For the first time in centuries, trade flourished without fear of bandits or borders. This newfound security sparked an explosion of commerce. Europe tasted Chinese silk and Persian glass, while Asia discovered European silver and Middle Eastern spices. But wealth wasn't just flowing in one direction. The Mongols imposed tribute systems on conquered territories, collecting taxes in the form of grain, silver, and luxury goods. Skilled artisans, scholars, and merchants were deliberately relocated across the empire, ensuring that knowledge and craftsmanship were shared between cultures. Under Mongol rule, the ancient world became interconnected like never before. A web of trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange stretching from the Pacific Ocean to the Mediterranean Sea, the empire that connected the world. The Mongol Empire wasn't just about conquering land, it was about conquering distance. At its height, it stretched over 24 million square kilometers, spanning from the Pacific Ocean to the Black Sea. Managing such an immense territory demanded something revolutionary, a system that could move information, goods, and people faster than ever before. This led to the creation of the YAM system, an incredible postal relay network. All across the empire, the Mongols built thousands of relay stations, spaced roughly 25 to 30 miles apart. Each station housed fresh horses, food, and shelter for riders. Couriers carrying official messages could swap exhausted horses for fresh ones and continue without rest. This allowed a single message to travel thousands of miles in just days, faster than anything the medieval world had ever seen. But the Mongols didn't stop there. To ensure safe and efficient trade, they introduced the peza, a small tablet or medallion carried by merchants and messengers. This symbol granted its bearers special protection and privileges under Mongol law. A trader carrying a peza could cross borders, use relay stations, and even demand resources from local governors. It was an early form of diplomatic passport, a tool that unified an empire of dozens of cultures and languages. Financially, the Mongols were remarkable innovators. In China, Kublai Khan introduced one of the earliest paper currencies in history, known as the Chow. Backed by precious metals and enforced by imperial decree, it became the standard currency across vast regions, allowing merchants to trade without hauling heavy gold or silver. Alongside this, Mongol administrators streamlined tax systems, reduced corruption, and standardized weights and measures across their empire. Steps that encouraged massive deseed. We leave massive. The result was unprecedented. For the first time, Europe, the Middle East, India, and China were bound together in a single global economy. Knowledge, inventions, and ideas traveled alongside silk and spices. From gunpowder and printing to Arabic numerals and medical texts, the Mongols became dental architects of globalization. Historians often call this era the Mongol Renaissance, a period when cultures collided, knowledge exploded, and the world became smaller. Yet this economic miracle came with hidden costs. By opening highways across continents, the Mongols also unknowingly accelerated the spread of the Black Death in the 14th century, a pandemic that would devastate Europe, the Middle East, and Asia alike. In a way, the same forces that made the Mongols powerful also sowed the seeds of tragedy. A reminder that even the greatest networks come with unforeseen consequences. The rise and fall of an economic giant. When Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan, became the ruler of China in 1260 CE, he inherited not just an empire, but a dream. To merge the nomadic traditions of the steppe with the sophisticated civilization of the East. He established the Yuan dynasty, moved the capital to Khambalik, modern-day Beijing, and built a flourishing trade hub that connected China, Persia, India, and Europe like never before. Under Kublai's rule, paper money, centralized taxation, and state-controlled industries transformed the Mongol economy into a powerful engine of global commerce. Yet, even empires built on ambition are not immune to excess. Kublai's grand projects, vast palaces, military expeditions, and lavish court spending drained the treasury. Attempts to invade Japan ended in disaster, with entire fleets destroyed by typhoons, the legendary kamikaze winds. Meanwhile, corruption spread among administrators and the empire became financially strained. By the late 13th century, the once unified Mongol economy began to show cracks. After Kublai's death in 1294 CE, the Mongol Empire splintered into four major khanates: the Yuan dynasty in China, the Golden Horde in Russia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, and the Ilkhanate in Persia. With unity gone, the Silk Road became fragmented. Trade slowed, security weakened, and merchants no longer traveled with the same confidence. Without Mongol protection, ancient routes became dangerous once more, and economies that had thrived under the empire's vast umbrella began to shrink and falter. Then came a silent destroyer, the Black Death. Between 1346 and 1353, the bubonic plague spread along the very trade routes the Mongols had opened, killing tens of millions across Eurasia. Cities were emptied, markets collapsed, and entire regions sank into chaos. In China, famine and rebellion erupted. By 1368 CE, the Yuan dynasty was overthrown by the Ming dynasty, marking the end of Mongol rule in China. The once golden silk road gradually faded into history, overshadowed by maritime trade routes controlled by rising European powers. For the Mongolian heartland, centuries of economic isolation followed. Without the empire's vast networks, Mongolia returned to its nomadic roots, surviving through herding, hunting, and seasonal migration. The sweeping grasslands still carried echoes of past glory, but the empire's economic power had vanished, like footprints erased by the wind. And yet, the Mongols' legacy endured. They had reshaped global commerce, built the world's first transcontinental network, and planted the seeds of modern globalization. Today, historians call the Mongol era a turning point in economic history, a time when ideas, goods, and cultures crossed boundaries like never before. It was a fleeting golden age, a reminder that even the mightiest economies rise and fall, but their ripples echo across centuries. Current situation: Mongolia's rebirth. Once, this land ruled the world. From the Danube to the Yellow Sea, from the Persian Gulf to Siberia, the Mongols carved an empire so vast that no other in history could rival it. And yet, here, at the heart of that empire, time flowed differently. After the fall of the Yuan dynasty in 1368 CE, Mongolia's power crumbled, its influence fading under centuries of domination by others. For hundreds of years, this vast steppe was caught between China's dynasties, the rising Russian Empire, and later the Soviet Union. Mongolia became a pawn in the great chessboard of empires, a land of warriors, turned into a forgotten frontier. But the Mongol spirit did not die. Beneath the shadow of foreign powers, Mongolians kept their traditions alive, the ancient long song carried on the wind, the throat singing that echoes across valleys, and the Notam festival where warriors still prove themselves in wrestling, archery, and horse racing, just as their ancestors once did under Genghis Khan. In 1911, when the Qing dynasty collapsed, Mongolia declared independence, but its dream of freedom was short-lived. The Soviets swept in, installing a communist regime in 1924. Under Soviet influence, monasteries were destroyed, lamas executed, and Mongolia's nomadic traditions suppressed. The ancient steppe identity faced its darkest hour. Then came 1990, a year of awakening. As the Soviet Union collapsed, Mongolia embraced democracy and free market reforms. But freedom came with uncertainty. Ulaanbaatar, once a sleepy city of gers and monasteries, exploded into a chaotic sprawl of glass towers, coal smog, and urban migration. Rural nomads abandoned the steppe for city life, while the gap between rich and poor widened. Today, Mongolia stands at a crossroads. It is a nation of just 3.5 million people, surrounded by two superpowers, Russia and China. Its vast mineral wealth promises prosperity, but also invites foreign exploitation. Its ancient traditions clash with modern consumerism. And yet, if you stand beneath the endless Mongolian sky, where the wind whispers across the grasslands. You feel it? The same unyielding spirit that once carried warriors across continents still burns in the hearts of Mongolians today. The battle for Mongolia's wealth. Beneath Mongolia's vast and rugged land lies a fortune. Coal, copper, uranium, rare earth minerals, and gold. For centuries, these treasures slept untouched beneath the frozen tundra and rolling steppe. But in the last 2 decades, Mongolia has been thrust into a mineral boom. The discovery of Oyu Tolgoi, one of the world's largest copper and gold mines, transformed the nation almost overnight. Investors poured in, billions of dollars flowed, and Ulaanbaatar became one of the fastest-growing capitals in Asia. Yet, this sudden wealth has not come without cost. Nearly 90% of Mongolia's exports now go to China, making the nation heavily dependent on its powerful southern neighbor. China consumes Mongolia's coal and copper to fuel its industrial machine, while Mongolia's economy rises and falls with Beijing's demand. This dependency has sparked fears of economic vulnerability, as Mongolia's fortunes are tied not to its own policies, but to the ambitions of others. The mining boom has also deepened social divides, while foreign companies and urban elites profit. Many nomadic herders have been pushed off ancestral lands. The ancient grazing routes of Mongolia's pastoral tribes now compete with sprawling open-pit mines and drying rivers. In Ulaanbaatar, wealth flows into glass towers. But on the steppe, many herders face poverty, debt, and climate hardship. The soul of a nomadic civilization stands at risk of being lost beneath the weight of industrialization. There is another price Mongolia is paying: environmental destruction. Mining and urban expansion have accelerated the desertification of the steppe, turning once fertile grasslands into barren dust. Harsh winters, known locally as juds, have worsened, killing livestock and pushing families into the city's crowded Gare districts. In Ulaanbaatar, coal-fueled heating fills the air with toxic smog, making it one of the most polluted capitals in the world. And yet, Mongolia is not without choices. Leaders in Ulaanbaatar are working to diversify the economy, seeking partnerships with Japan, South Korea, India, and the West to reduce dependence on China. There is growing investment in renewable energy, wind, solar, and hydro aimed at protecting the steppe while meeting modern demands. At the same time, grassroots movements are rising to preserve Mongolia's nomadic heritage, ensuring that even as the nation modernizes, its ancient soul survives. But one question remains: can Mongolia balance progress with preservation? Or will the land of Genghis Khan, once the beating heart of the largest empire in history, become just another frontier consumed by global powers and corporate greed? Between giants, beneath the eternal sky. Mongolia stands at a crossroads of history, a nation of just 3.5 million people suspended between two superpowers, China to the south and Russia to the north. For centuries, these giants have shaped Mongolia's destiny, sometimes as allies, sometimes as oppressors. Today, Mongolia walks a delicate tightrope, guarding its sovereignty while navigating the competing interests of its neighbors. Its relationship with China is complicated. Economically, Mongolia depends on China. Nearly 90% of its exports, from coal to copper, flows south. Yet, with dependency comes vulnerability. Any slowdown in China's economy sends shockwaves across Mongolia's markets. At the same time, Mongolia must contend with the weight of history, memories of invasions, domination, and cultural influence linger like shadows beneath the eternal blue sky. To the north lies Russia. Historically, Mongolia's protector during the 20th century, especially during the Cold War. For decades, Mongolia was deeply tied to Moscow's orbit. Its schools taught Russian. Its industries relied on Soviet support. But after the collapse of the USSR, Mongolia found itself adrift, forced to redefine its place in the world. Today, while Russia remains an important partner, Its influence has waned compared to the economic gravity of China. Yet Mongolia has not surrendered its independence. Over the last 2 decades, it has embraced what it calls the third neighbor policy, forging closer ties with nations like Japan, South Korea, India, the United States, and the European Union. This strategy seeks to balance Mongolia's dependence on its immediate neighbors by diversifying partnerships, attracting foreign investment, and securing a voice on the global stage. But the challenges are immense. Climate change, urbanization, and youth unemployment threaten Mongolia's stability. Political corruption and economic inequality deepen societal divides, while external pressures from global powers create constant tension. And yet, beneath all this uncertainty, there remains a unifying force: the Mongolian spirit. Across the vast steppe, beneath the endless blue sky, the descendants of Genghis Khan still ride their horses, sing their songs, and honor their ancestors. For them, Mongolia is not just a country. It is a living memory, a bridge between past and future. The question is no longer whether Mongolia can survive between giants, but whether it can thrive, forging a new identity while preserving the soul of the steppe. As the sun sets over the Gobi, the camera pans to the horizon. The narrator's voice fades into silence, leaving only the haunting echoes of a horseman's flute carried by the wind. Beneath the eternal blue sky, a small nation stands unbroken. Its empire has vanished, but its spirit endures. This is Mongolia, where history whispers and the future awaits.